And I can share a little bit about background if that's helpful. Sure. So I actually started out my career on the product side of the house, and specifically on the operation side. So getting into like agile development, which is all about optimizing around early and frequent customer feedback. So relevant to our conversation today. I got itchy to talk to customers a lot more, and got and started to move over into the customer success realm and really focus in on that full customer experience, both in and outside of the product itself, and kind of marrying those two things. And then also had the opportunity to, as we built out customer success functions, we learned, what works in one-to-one interactions, and very quickly as your company scales, scale becomes a thing. And so you need to think about how to automate, how to be efficient with the success of your customers. And that took me over to marketing, where I got a chance to kind of start up customer marketing and blend success, marketing, and product to scale.
So cool. That's like really nailing the product and customer success relationship. So thank you very much. And hi, Alex. So happy to have you as part of the panel. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the customer success world.
Certainly, very happy to be here. So I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer at Nazaza, and I'm about 5 weeks into that role. So lots of, I was especially excited about this topic because I think we're kind of, let's say there's room for us to improve in this area. So I promise I did not just sign up for the webinar as a panelist to just listen and hijack the conversation, but I'll be providing hopefully some value, but also be learning plenty today as well. But before that, I've spent my career for the last 10 years in startups. Most notably, I was employee 32 at a company called Fairsail, where I spent 5 years. I was our first CSM at $1 million in revenue, and we kind of grew the company to 20 and exited. So that was kind of the transformative, let's say, 0 to 20 story. And ever since then have been working in various startups, leading customer success and post-sale teams. So I think maybe scale is a nice to have. For me, it's much more about kind of getting the right processes off the ground to get us from the 0 to the 20, and then politely listening to what Danielle is going to share post 20, because that I have no idea about, but really happy to be here. It's a topic near and dear to my heart, and look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you so much. We actually had very interesting conversation about product and customer success, so I'm sure your insights will be super valuable today. And as a moderator, but also as product representative, we have Shachar from Ever After. So Shachar, I'll let you introduce yourself and feel free to start.
Thank you, Adi. So I'm Shachar. I'm VP Product and Strategy here at Ever After. Those of you who don't know us, we at Ever After enable customer success teams to build customer hubs throughout the lifecycle, onboarding, ongoing, high touch, low touch, automatic QBRs that could be shared in-app or through a shared link. I'm super excited to have this call and hear the amazing perspective of our panelists. So I would start with a question. Let's start with talking about challenges and pains. So what are the main challenges and pains in working with product department? Danielle, would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, there are no pains, right? This is easy peasy.
It's been great speaking with you. We can end it here.
Exactly, done. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think one of the main challenges or pains that I see between the two organizations is where you have the dynamic of sort of the blaming type culture that can happen sometimes between product and success teams, where you get kind of the classic CS thinks that product builds just what they want to build and like play with the new technology and things versus what customers actually wants. And so I think that definitely is a key pain point in the industry, but I think there are lots of ways to help mitigate that pain right out of the gate and building a really strong customer-centric culture at your organization, aligning around shared goals between your product and success teams. And I'm happy to talk about ways to do that. And also just building really strong relationships between the two teams out of the gate. And make sure that there's a culture of collaboration between the teams. So each group understands what each other's goals are. They understand that they're shared, and then setting up mechanisms that I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit to help kind of reinforce that and things. So and I think it also kind of it can start all the way from the people that you hire and setting the expectation in the hiring process, both from in your job description as a CSM, making it very clear of the collaboration between the two teams and that it's an expected part of the role. Similarly on the product side, being able to do that and then reinforcing that with candidates with things like, like on all of our interview panels, we have somebody from product interviewing CSMs, and we have the reverse. At past companies. And so that sort of signals to candidates the importance that the company has in that relationship.
Wow, that's we are 5 minutes in, and I think it's already like a really, really successful tip to think, to consider, to embrace. Nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I like the way you frame that, because I think earlier in my career, I'm probably guilty of the blame game. And maybe I'm reformed. I'm reformed, let's say. I've seen the light. So maybe a good segue there. Definitely echo a lot of your points. I think, my impression, and maybe I'm doing kind of CS-splaining this because I've not actually been in product before. So please correct me. But product is a lonely place, especially if there isn't structure and process set up to frankly shield product managers from the deluge of things that come in, right? And I've worked, again, in startups, process is sometimes hard to come by and in burning need of optimization. And I experience in, let's say, immature organizations, this, we just chuck it over the fence and it goes on a Jira board somewhere. And then I use the same Jira board to slap the product manager in the face, right? Not acknowledging that they have 100 new things that came in throughout, the last couple of weeks. So I think maybe stepping with one foot into that lane and into that reality is really important to drive empathy. And essentially, my approach, and we'll get into it throughout the call today, I'm sure, is really to say, look, you're going to get the most requests from customer experience or the post-sale team. So let me help you by providing a blocker, or let's say a dam on the floodgate, right? So we can kind of pre-curate, pre-organize, draw your attention to the things that we think matter and are urgent. And then also ensure that we don't just kind of open the floodgates and chuck it over the fence. And I guess I would have characterized that as kind of that initial real shift from the loudest voice winning to a proper process is something that has to be shared between product and customer success, because the customer will suffer if we're in the loudest voice wins era of our evolution of CS product maturity collaboration. So I think the loudest voice winning, helping product escaping from that area is really important. And maybe one of the biggest challenges in working with product is because we don't have enough time as a product team to get out from under that, under our desk, from the stuff that's raining down on us from every customer, every prospect, every internal employee. I also think maybe the other challenge I find is, as an organization, culturally, or kind of from the top down, we have to be able to collectively understand how we prioritize market-driven versus customer-driven feature development, right? So, if we're a business where customer X demands something that's not really in our strategic roadmap, but I want that money now, that's a company-wide problem, right? And is going to make it really challenging for customer success teams to also be able to advocate for maybe the smaller things that aren't as kind of sexy, but unblock adoption, unblock expansion, and some of the more granular things that matter for a customer-led growth company. So I think there's some element of business model and, let's say, lack of consistency and alignment amongst business leaders that causes a real challenge in that relationship as well. So hopefully that's enough reformation, i.e. Not blaming, but rather demonstrating some empathy. I can change. I wish my wife could hear me. I can indeed change. There we go.
I love that. I love that so much. Just to build on that, there was something that you highlighted, Alex, that I thought was really key in that balancing product teams being able to effectively balance meeting your existing customer needs and meeting their future needs, right? Which is kind of speaking to the market and making sure that you get that balance, right.
Yeah, and there's no surprises, right? Because, you know, as a company, if we say, you know what, 50% of our capacity is dedicated toward making what we have better, 25% is new and exciting stuff to go and sell and defensively kind of position our company against market forces, and then maybe 25% for tech debt and bugs. Great. Let's make that transparent. And if sales and marketing has exhausted their 25% bucket, then they have to take something out. And it shouldn't come from our 50%. Right. So setting that kind of cross-company collaboration so that at the very least we can kind of one in, one out with the certain buckets and the different different, let's say, tugs and pulls, or there's a better expression I can't think of, through the tension, there it is, through the organization is super important.
So let's say that you do have a 50% of the product and R&D team focusing on existing customers. How do you make sure that your customers' voice are heard?
Ooh, such a good one. I think there's happy to start. I think one of the key things is, and this kind of gets to the products, I mean, really everybody in the organization, understanding what your customer's journey looks like and aligning around that customer journey holistically. What are the highs? What are the lows? What are the opportunities? And making that really, really transparent and doing that collectively with the product team and your customer facing teams. I think other key things that are helpful, it's sort of this macro thing around, you know, companies talk a lot about wanting to be customer centric. But the question is, how do you operationalize that? Everybody wants to be customer centric, but it's hard to operationalize. And one of the key things is a company's ability to get outside of their silos a little easier. That on this, you know, when your company is a little bit smaller, as it gets larger, and you scale, those are some of the pain points that you start to feel as a company where that starts to break down and you've got those silos. So really paying attention to building that customer-centric mindset, having a shared view of the customer journey, and then operationalizing it by having regular mechanisms to share voice of the customer back to the product team. So for example, one of the things that we do, and some of this is a crawl, walk, run too. Tools are a very helpful thing, but if you can't do tools to help you with this, there are other ways that you can get this information in the hands of your product teams. We've set up a bi-monthly voice of the customer meeting, cross-functional meeting. We do it with all of our product folks are there and all of our customer facing teams. So they're getting insight from marketing. They're getting insight from sales. Why are we losing and winning deals as it relates to products? And they're hearing it from success and support. And one of the things that has helped there is, or one of the challenges actually that we had early on was having, you know, we captured feedback via Slack channel. And that was great until it wasn't, right? A lot of noise, really difficult to be able to pull out themes from that for product, and product really struggled with understanding what the core themes were and then relating that back to different segments within your customer base that were asking for these different features and things, because that certainly matters a lot. And so it was kind of a quick and easy win to set up this meeting, get the right folks in the room to share the themes that you're hearing across the board, and then be able to delve into more of the details. And that's kind of how we've started. Other companies have kind of scaled that and started to implement tools to help you do exactly that, aggregate that information, tie it to demographic, firmographic, and revenue information that you have to make it even more impactful for the product teams and easier for your customers to provide that feedback directly in the product itself.
Yeah, it strikes me. I think there's two elements here from my perspective, and I agree a lot. You know, the biweekly meeting is something seems to always be the frequency, and is something that we are just starting to adopt at Zaza as well, and I've adopted in previous companies. But you know, it strikes me there's kind of two elements here. One is discipline over the input channels, and then the other is kind of altitude of those conversations. And let me explain what I mean. I guess when I say altitude, I think, you know, biweekly flying low at 500 feet around bugs or things that came out of a release that are causing friction, that's a biweekly meeting with, and I think for us, it's important, it's only with the support team, because we also need to train our customers, you know, bluntly, as we, you know, you in customer success and startups, you go from kind of being the master of none and doing everything to doing proactive CS and having a support team and having an onboarding team. And we're going in that, you know, we were just kind of completing that transition at Zaza. So ensuring that every bug is channeled through support, whether it's, you know, if they're in onboarding and they find it and they haven't been transitioned to support yet, the onboarding rep will transfer it to the support desk and kind of front the communication to the customer. But think about the next customer of this conversation, which is product, right? So having a one-to-one channel between support and product, so it's that conversation happening only, was really important for us, because it meant that if a CSM who hears from a customer says, hey, product, I need this tomorrow, they can say, I'm not listening to you, please send it to support, and we'll think about it in the next 2 weeks, right? We have a process for this. And that kind of gets us out of that defensive posture, right? We're creating the right channels that I can kick this next conversation or push this conversation to, so that at least we can stop the loudest voice wins kind of situation. So that's important. And then, of course, there's the larger things like enhancement requests and big strategic roadmap imperatives that fly at a higher altitude, you know, 30,000 feet or whatever. And those are quarterly meetings we have. And this quarter is locked. If you have something that's really important, you bring it to the next quarterly cadence, right? So setting those, setting that infrastructure up to allow consistent communication. So I have kind of one pane of glass to view my prioritization as a product manager. That's been really important for us. What has been a real challenge, and we have stopped doing, and maybe folks kind of on this session can relate to, is essentially opening the floodgate of communication. If I have a top 10 list of bugs that I as a support team am telling my product team I need urgently because I know the customer pain, right? I have the data. This is your top 10. Don't worry, the other 40 that are outstanding, if a customer chases, I'm not going to send that request to you. I'm going to defend my top 10 list with my customer, right? So if we support and product can agree together that these are the top 10, this is what we say is important, please help us deliver, then we stand behind, as a support and customer success and customer facing organization, we stand behind that decision ourselves instead of just passing through the noise to the product and engineering part of the organization. Right. So we also essentially are empowering the post-sale team to kind of own the now, next, later message and kind of set the right expectation with customers up front, as opposed to, you know, I'll put it like very specific example, showing up to a customer call and saying, I'll try to plead with our product manager to make this happen for you. Awkward customer experience, not a particularly nice experience for the CSM. So if we could say, I'm sorry, this is not going into the sprint this week because of these reasons, it's going to go in 4 months or 4 weeks from now. That's something that's defensible that we own, so product can focus on execution and doing their job.
That's such a great, I love that, Alex. One of the things that we've done to help with that as well, is to do a program where you're pairing product experts. They'll primarily come from support with our product teams, right? Mm-hmm. So they're kind of embedded, if you will, in that voice of the customer in the room, not only for providing feedback in a more real-time and rapid pace, but they're getting valuable insight and being able to weigh in on, you know, before things get built, right? Yeah. We're thinking about this design on XYZ, right? The back of the napkin stuff. So they're able to get insight into what's coming down the line, influencing it in a real time, you know, just in time way that then helps them take that back to the team. And it also helps with enablement of the team, not just sort of prioritization.
No, I love that. And we did that at a previous company, something similar. And to extend that analogy a little bit as well, I mean, firstly, it prevents the bug or the enhancement because we say, hey, think about this. Customer X actually would want it this way, right? But also what was really effective is it showed and did, as they say, show them, don't tell them, right? So this showed them and didn't just tell them, and them in this analogy is the product and engineering team, that we're in it for them. We're in it to ensure that the enhancement requests that I complain about every week on that support product call, I want to help you get that done to remove the customer friction, right? So one of the things that's important is connecting those two altitudes, the 2 week, the meeting that happens every 2 weeks, and the quarterly roadmap prioritization. So just to extend what you've mentioned with a tactical example for my kind of career past is we do the quarterly roadmap prioritization. We say this quarter, here's the 5 big features we want to build. In that biweekly meeting, the first one after that next quarter starts, we'll also bring a curated list of very small effort, high value enhancement requests that have to do with that product area. So while you're enhancing this, don't forget about these 10 things that have been logged over the last year, right? And we're not guaranteeing all 10 are done, but let's capture the low-hanging fruit while you're in that area of the product. And that really got that kind of customer success and product partnership working at a very granular level, because essentially you're positioning and you're setting up the product team to be the customer hero by giving them that granularity of data. And of course, that's what they want to be, right? So I love your example, and maybe just a different flavor, let's say, as well.
I do have a question. So let's say that eventually we need to agree on those 10 items that for sure are going to be a part of the roadmap, but then we are able to protect any other item that is being asked. So in order to do that, I guess that we need to collect a lot of different feedback across different channels, and then we need to digest it and to somehow to prioritize it. So I do like to ask 2 different questions. One about what is your take and how you collect feedback from your customers, and then how you eventually do the work of prioritizing from this entire list of different feedbacks. And it could be if you have small amount of customers, it might be easier, but when you have tons of different customers from different tiers, so it needs to have a process in place. So maybe you can help our audience with that as well.
Maybe I can jump in, because I think my answer is not as scaled and probably less impressive, not to raise expectations for you, Danielle, but let me underwhelm very quickly. So, for us, obviously, we don't have a huge amount of customers. In my career, that's always been the case. So it's a little easier, but I think what's important is bifurcating the customer channel with the internal channel. Let me explain what I mean. So I want to give customers an easy ability to give us feedback wherever they want to approach us. The worst customer experience is when somebody logs a support ticket and we say, hey, that's a suggestion, not a bug. I'm closing your case, log it over here, right? Of course, we'll do that for them. But internally, it has to go to one place, because I don't want our product team having to look across 5 different systems to have that single pane of glass. So what I've done in the past, in product enhancement requests and roadmap suggestions, that's one channel. We've launched in previous companies customer communities where customers are able to give feedback directly in the community, which is actually also impactful because you invite product in to feedback on their feedback, right? And really kind of build that direct customer empathy and unblock CS as that kind of let's say go between or middle person between those two groups. And I think so, but what's important when you log an enhancement request in our community or in the product, it goes into one system that the product manager is able to look at, right? So that kind of approach is very important. I think even more in the weeds, let's say, or at an even lower altitude, 2 things. One, aligning on common definitions of product areas feels like pretty granular, but is super important. Why? Because if I get a bunch of support cases that come in, and I group it in one way, if I get in product requests and group it in a different way, right? I can't see which product area, which product sub area to divide between. So that was something that was very important, and kind of a Bible type thing that we maintained as an organization. And the last thing is prioritization. That's the product team's job to tell us what the structure of priority is, right? But for us to religiously apply a data, and if I may, I actually hate the term priority, because when you inevitably talk to customers and say, this is a low priority item, you're telling them their opinion doesn't matter. Severity is the term that I prefer to use because it's objective. right? This is a low severity bug. I appreciate it's high priority for you. So it's a high priority issue with low severity. That kind of is a nice way to balance those two things in my experience. But getting the product team to tell us how they want to structure. In the past, we've used the Moscow method: must, should, could, won't. And then when we have those 10 items for that quarterly roadmap, we look at, okay, the product area you're dealing with is this. Here's the 20 items that have been logged for that product area. And here's our 5 must, 5 should, 5 could, and 5 won't. And then, of course, the product team will go to engineering and the Scrum Masters and say, if there's anything on this list that's like an extra large t-shirt size, tell us, because we may want to replace it with 5 things that are small t-shirt sizes, if that's how you do your kind of effort estimation. So just some ideas, maybe very tactically, that have been helpful in the past.
I'm going to steal that priority versus severity. I love that.
Oh, that's, and I'm going to steal everything that you've said, as I established earlier. So I'm glad at least we can trade.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's kind of I take a crawl, walk, run approach, right? Depending on where you're at in your journey with your customers and with your product and organization. I think some of the low hanging fruit out of the gate is setting up a simple Slack channel where you've got a single source of truth for your customer facing teams to be able to put that information in there. I would pair it though with that meeting that I talked about, that regular, monthly, bi-monthly voice of the customer, to be able to roll up themes, because that's where it gets messy. You're capturing it there. It's really helpful, but it can get really noisy really quickly. And those are two fairly simple things to do that you don't need sophisticated tools to be able to leverage to start getting feedback and building that muscle. The thing that I think is important that isn't always done at the beginning too is making sure that the feedback loop is indeed a loop. It really incents. I should have called this out as one of the key challenges between the two groups. Capturing is great, but if there's not a loop back both to your customer facing teams and to customers, it really de-incents, it's not a word, I don't think, your teams from being able to capture and provide that feedback to the product organization. And again, I think being able to, Alex, you touched on this, setting the expectation with your, CS folks, that not every bit of feedback that you get is going to be acted upon. And they need to manage those conversations, but making sure they've got a partner with products in having those conversations. So the now, next, later stuff from a roadmap perspective, making that visible, really helpful, right out of the gate.
You're spot on. And, it's that partnership. Let me step into the product team's shoes and say, hey, you're probably drowning in stuff, so let me help you. Let me turn off that tap for a minute so you can think about what the hell we need to do, right? And then when I need a favor, because customer X is going to churn and there's something that's going to be like the smallest little piece of effort in this sprint, you can help me with that, right? And it's that kind of alignment of incentives and empathy that's important. And also kind of saying to the product team, give me a roadmap that is reliable, that we do. So we, as a CSM team, is probably presenting the roadmap to the customer, and a lot of QBRs. We do what we say, right? So when we tell the customer it's not happening now, but it's happening then, they understand that that's rock solid. So I think that's important as well. I mean, there's one more kind of micro example that I think is important is, I call it the Napoleon complex of customers. And I don't know if that's makes sense to anyone, but customers that pay the smallest amount usually shout the loudest about tiny things being super urgent for their company. And we have to, as a customer success team, it's part of our job to ensure that their expectations are managed, right? And we say, look, this is urgent for you, but it's low severity. This isn't something we're going to be doing. So giving kind of protecting, even from the loudest voices, protecting our product team so they can do their best work is super important from in terms of prioritizing and organizing that feedback.
Love that. I think as you kind of get beyond, you start to think about scaling your efforts, and you're getting good with, your Slack channel, you've got your regular cadence of meetings. You'll start to build on that over time and incorporate, better tooling on the capture side, as well as aggregating those insights, tying it, integrating that with your Salesforce or your CS platform. and support platform to be able to tie that to, to revenue is always going to be helpful from a prioritization perspective. Leveraging community, right? Big, huge plus one to that. That's a great way to be able to get feedback from your customers and have your product teams in there engaging, and customers love it. Love being able to feel like they've got access to your, product team.
For sure. And just on that, like before community, they're engaging with, usually the product team gets engaged when there's a Red account that's pissed about each product, right? So we're firefighting. Oh, talk to our product leader, they'll fix all your stuff, right? But having that, having the wins, the highs with the lows of like enthusiastic customers that have really good ideas and actually being able to engage with them directly, I think is hopefully an important counterpoint to what must be a busy schedule of crappy conversations if it's just those Red accounts.
Something else that we've done that's been really helpful and impactful for our product teams that kind of goes a click down is that we leverage, I hope this is okay to say, Gong. And it's been really helpful to give deeper meaning to the feedback that they're getting from the customer team. So you hear about, a theme from a particular part of the product. It makes it real for our CSMs to be grabbing a Gong snippet that's relevant, tag it, shoot that over to, we've created folders in there to for product to be able to go in and say, here's a specific example so you can go deeper. And and then we do a warm intro. If the product manager says, I'd love to talk to this customer about that. Great, we can tee that up for you. And that, well, just builds really strong relationships. It gives more depth to the feedback that's being given and stuff too, and makes it more actionable in that way.
We do have some participant questions that I would like to tackle. So, and I think that it resonates with what you just said. So would you invite product managers to customer? I mean, what is your take between like creating a relationship between a customer and someone from product? What are the benefits and what are the risks that might have involved?
Maybe I'll let the former product manager take that one first.
Heck yeah. I absolutely, you definitely want your product folks to, for a lot of different reasons, to be able to jump on calls with customers. It gets them closer to the customer and again brings them more in line with understanding revenue and the impacts of what's being built in the roadmap, and not. It's great for the customer to be able to build that relationship directly with your product folks as well, and get deeper insights on your product roadmap and some of the whys behind what we're building. It allows them to speak more powerfully to the product strategy and things as well. So I don't think there's any downside from a customer perspective. And on the CSM side, I think it makes some product folks nervous to do though. But I think there's all sorts of goodness that comes of having those product folks on that call, and make sure that we're doing, a good job on the CS side to help prep them.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think on the CS side, it's important for us to position that as like a really important win for the customer, right? Because that's one of I'd say the most effective tools in our arsenal to placate a customer that's maybe a little bit frustrated by the product, or that maybe has a lot of feedback for the product, right? We say, oh, thank you. We'll get back to you. We'll let you know. And we need to close the loop, as Danielle mentioned before, but speak directly to that director of product or the VP product of an organization. If a customer is having QBRs across their product suite, maybe 10, 20 times a year, that one or two where they kind of have a deep dive with the product leader of the organization is the one they're going to remember. So positioning it as let me pull some strings for you. I think this would be really great for you to speak with this person about. That positioning is a lot better than, you got a lot of product complaints. Let me send you over to the product leader. You can tell them directly. Right. And I'm, obviously those are two extremes, but that positioning, and I always, as an American, call it, I say, of course, Danielle, you are also an American, but I'm based in London. So I make a special point. And I'm glad, I think most of this audience may be from there as well. So I can use this analogy without being blankly stared at. as the customer success manager being the quarterback, there you go, of the customer experience, one of the plays that they need to call, but reserved for important situations only, is bringing in that product leader. That's just one of the tools in the arsenal to ensure that the customer can ultimately be successful.
And it builds such a great relationship too, that I think it sounds like a simple thing, but it's so impactful to retaining and growing your customers. It just builds deeper engagement with them, right? And deeper engagement with your brand overall, the more folks that they're engaging with from your team.
Absolutely.
Yep. I will say, Alex, that I will have to listen to the recording and then Google what you just said, because I didn't understand the analogy, but I'm based on.
So I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to tell you something very quickly, and I'm sorry to distract us, but I'll be brief. My first big kind of keynote presentation at Fairsail at this HR tech startup that I spent 5 years at, I got up in front of the audience. It was in London, and I instead have replaced quarterback with central midfielder, because that's the one who kind of calls the plays on the football and soccer pitch. But that analogy also didn't work. So I've tried to translate it, but unfortunately it doesn't really work. So I'm sorry in advance. You're going to have to.
No worries. That's why we have the recording. That's why we have the recording.
Perfect. And you can listen to that back on the recording as well. Please don't. I'm sorry.
The football analogies are always tough.
Yes, indeed.
Last question before I would ask you to share like any other tactics or tips that you have is that how do you measure like a joint success with the product team? Do you have like shared KPIs? What is working, what is not working now that you can recommend us?
Yeah, I'm happy to start.
Go for it.
I think shared high level goals around NPS. I'm also a very big fan of product owning revenue. And so having shared goals around revenue, product adoption, right? Product adoption is everything that CS does. That is our jam. And it's, for product folks, it's if you build it, they will come. You need your customer facing teams to bring the cool stuff that you're building, bring it to life and make sure that it's getting used in things. And so I think product adoption is another key shared goal.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say CSATs, I think, as well, in addition to your NPSs.
Yeah. I think a couple of things there. So I love product adoption as a goal. I think one of the things we talked a lot about in this conversation is about how we get feedback in. Danielle, you mentioned also closing the loop, but for me, talking about process, I feel like we don't speak enough between CS and product teams about the process to get the information out, not just each bug that's resolved or enhancements that's added, but like the joint webinar that CS and product run every quarter, educating the customer about the new stuff, the tailored follow-up that we have for customers that don't adopt the new stuff quickly, right? That whole process for me is bluntly even more important, I think, than some of the inputs. So finding KPIs that balance inputs versus outputs, I think is really important. We're actually going through this process at Nazaza. We're doing 2023 planning and kind of aligning KPIs. We just migrated from a CRO-led revenue organization to now a CCO-led post-sale organization. So we've kind of really done the switch. So a lot of the KPIs are changing. And one of the ones that I'm really excited about is time to value. And I know that can be kind of called a fluffy metric. And I think it is if it's not done appropriately. So let me explain. Our revenue is tied to, so we're a travel tech platform and we work with customers like TUI and Explore or FTI to allow them to book complex multi-day tours and tailor them to people's personal interest, right? So it's essentially a booking management tool for travel, but instead of a flight to hotel and flight back, you can do a 2-week tour that stops in a million places, but you need technology for that. We're the technology. We charge, our contractual structure is subscription, but the large majority of our contract is earned through percentage of booking volume. So there's a transactional element. So for us, we directly tie adoption and usage of the platform with revenue. So as someone targeted on net expansion, right, that's incredibly important for us to get the customer up to speed, making their first booking quickly. So our metric is signature, contract signature to first production booking. Now, with our newly formed onboarding team, we're sitting there thinking about all the things we can do to make, the kickoff call happen, prep the customer pre-sale to get everything ready, right? But ultimately, the biggest blocker for us are product challenges in loading data, product challenges in integrating different sources of inventory, right? All your hotel contracts and flight contracts. So that KPI is so tied, we share it with product. And that's already changing roadmap behavior because of that direct link to revenue if I get you on board faster. So I guess my macro point, getting out of the example, is finding the business goal. We say at Nazaza, we have 1.5 billion euros of booking volume, not yet onboarded into our platform from just our existing customers, right? The faster I can onboard that, the more money we get, the more we reinvest in the product. So aligning that kind of strategic business goal with that shared KPI is important. And then on the NPS point, I've struggled with this a little bit, how CS and product relate or overlap or collaborate or fight over the NPS metric. And very simply, we've aligned with our product leader to do two things. One, in product NPS, that's something that product is responsible for reporting and is KPI'd on. If you use the product, you're experiencing it, your feedback is product related. So the end user feedback goes there. And then the super user and executive sponsor NPS, much more about relationship and friction, that's responsibility of customer success. But together, we co-form the voice of the customer report for in-product and super user executive sponsor feedback. So those are the two KPIs we share, and it really has started to drive the right behavior very quickly.
I love that.
Nice.
One that I also like to do that's not necessarily obvious to measure the success of the collaboration between CS and product is employee engagement scores. Because you see this show up sometimes in those scores where you see a break in the relationship between the two, where you see a break in that feedback loop, the loop back, you'll see it show up there. And that's another one that I like to pay attention to.
That's good. I like it.
All right. I have to say that I think that this webinar was mind-blowing. I think that we need to really review the recording and that takes so many different tactics and things to implement. So I would like to thank you for sharing all of these valuable pieces of information with us. To wrap things up, if you have any last tip or tactic or something that you can share with us so we can learn and act upon it tomorrow, I'm happy to give you the stage for that.
If I may, I have two because I probably can't decide one if that's okay with
Sure.
you. So I'll jump in. So firstly, one point we didn't get to is kind of about well, we did, but in more detail, the prioritization of big roadmap items. In my experience, usually the product team is focused more at a startup on ensuring we can release appropriately, get the right user stories to the engineers. And especially if we hire product too late, we spend more time taming the engineering monolith than listening to customers. So CS fills a wider role for a certain period of time. One of the things that I've done that I think I would recommend everybody do is if it doesn't exist, create the cross-functional forum. Because if there isn't a cross-functional forum, your support team has that bi-weekly call with product at the 500-foot altitude, but then there's 40,000 feet conversations happening. And if you don't have the ability to be in the same room with the product marketing or marketing leader, the sales leader, then they're negotiating against your big 40,000 feet items when they negotiate for theirs in a separate communication channel, right? So stepping into the product lane and saying, hey, why don't we all get together and discuss this to make your life easier, ultimately makes it better for you and the customer as well. That's item one. The second piece, more simply, early adopter programs we haven't touched on, but it's one of the things that I love. You use it as a carrot with the customer. Hey, you're struggling with this area. Why don't you and 2 other customers only get exclusive access to this early adopter group? Builds product champions, gets the product team directly involved with customers, but CS are the ones that are looking at the customer health, the revenue potential, the churn risk, and saying, these are the customers that we should invite for these reasons. And that little kind of partnership to really drive developing with the customer, an early adopter and early adoption is definitely a tip or trick that I can stand behind.
Thank you.
I think the two that come to mind for me that feel most impactful out of the gate are one, just being intentional about building a strong relationship between the two orgs. It doesn't happen by accident. So doing that right out of the gate is so important. And we've talked about a few of the things that you can do to help foster that early on. It reminds me of when we hired our head of products. I was on he'll probably be okay with me saying this. I was on his interview panel and just stalked him before he even started to start building that relationship right out of the gate. I also highly benefit that while I have a product background and moved to CS, he started in CS and moved to product. That was super, super helpful. But again, just being really intentional about building those strong relationships, not only at a leadership level, but fostering that type of culture on your teams and aligning your CSMs or support folks with your product teams. You can step back in a lot of ways, and a lot of goodness comes from those relationships, and it just empowers other folks to be living that culture, which is great. The other thing is building a shared understanding of the full customer journey across your organization, but certainly most importantly between CS and your product teams, and evolving it together, sharing the learnings as you're making changes to that customer journey, sharing those and it is all sorts of goodness.
Thank you. So thank you again for joining us. I think it was a really super valuable webinar, and thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day and week.
This was fun. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.